one casino in Massachusetts made sense.
How about you, Martha? Done a lot of gambling?
I'm not a gambler.
Really? Never been down to
I haven't been down to Foxwoods. I know you have because you talked about
that's right.
it.
It's a wild time.
But let me tell you what I have. It's a wild time. So let me tell you, you'll be looking for those to open then, right?
That's right.
What I have done is because when this first appeared as a proposal in Massachusetts, I knew that we weren't ready for it. We didn't have a money laundering statute. I know from working with the Attorney General in New Jersey and Nevada, the kind of oversight and regulatory work you have to do around everything from money laundering to organized crime infiltration to human trafficking. And so one of the things I did do as Attorney General and with folks in our office was work really closely in crafting this if we were going to maximize the economic benefit and minimize the social ills.
Let's step back up again. I'm sorry, Martha.
I was just going to say, both of you have said that you would, if we get rid of the casino law in Massachusetts, that you would like a Springfield casino. Isn't that kind of thwarting? Well, it is thwarting the will of the voters. We'll start with you, Charlie.
If the voters turn down the three casinos and the slot parlor, good for the voters. That's the way it's supposed to work. And I'm glad that this question is on the ballot. Unlike the Attorney General, I thought it should have been on the ballot from the beginning. And when you collect 125,000 signatures, you belong on the ballot. But I've walked the site in Springfield. I'm pretty sure I'm the only candidate who has. And that's a really interesting proposal in a part of Springfield that was hit by the tornado that is basically dying right before our eyes. And it's a $600 million investment, and it's a very innovative model in the sense that the casino, they don't wrap the whole thing up into the project. It's a casino, and then they basically build a streetscape. They basically rebuild a part of downtown Springfield with the hospitality, restaurant, and retail piece, and they connect it to the Civic Center so that the MGM becomes the global player that can actually bring entertainment venues and entertainment acts to the
So you don't think you're thwarting the will of the voters?
Well, no. I mean, I think bringing it up and having a conversation about it is worthwhile, but the vote, at that point, the legislature and others may choose to say no.
Very quickly.
How about you, quickly?
We'll know in 2 weeks, and I have said if it is repealed, I would consider as part of a regional economic development plan for Springfield that kind of leveraging of an economic with a casino that could provide growth for other industries.
Okay, we're halfway through, so we're going to try to pick up the pace of drop, but just staying on the whole gambling thing, more is bet and lost on the lottery in the state per capita than any state in America by far. We add 3 casinos and a slots parlor if your vote is successful and we don't repeal. Are either of you troubled by the fact that we have this increasing huge reliance on low and moderate income people losing money to help fund state and local services that you both embrace? Martha-Coakley and then Charlie Baker.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why I'm against internet gaming. It's one of the reasons why we have brought very strict consumer protections to make sure there's no lending of money on casino premises, to make sure you can't be foreclosed upon if you somehow, get into debt because of casinos. So there are consumer protections we've worked on. I'd continue to do that as governor if we do move forward here.
You worry about it, Charlie Baker?
Yeah, a lot. In fact, one of the reasons I supported one casino is I believe that I can't imagine that 3 casinos and a slot parlor isn't going to have a huge impact on the lottery, which, as we all know, is a big supporter for the Commonwealth cities and towns.
Let me ask you.
And by the way, it's also going to 3 casinos and a slot parlor will absolutely have an impact on the other industries, hospitality, restaurant, retail, that compete for that entertainment and discretionary dollar that people spend. Part of what made the Springfield project interesting to me was you're talking about making a big investment in a place where currently there's not a lot going on, and that's what makes it attractive.
Let me ask you something about judges. Jared Rumey was arrested at least 19 times for beating up 4 different girlfriends, and one judge after another let him out with little or no jail time. After he murdered Jennifer Martell, a lot of us believe that judges around here will be getting tougher about repeat violent batterers, and yet we just learned that a Lynn judge allowed yet another repeat batterer to get off with no jail time even after he dragged his girlfriend with his car. So what, Martha-Coakley, should happen to these judges? Should they just be able to serve until they retire, or should there be something here?
Well, first of all, we have made changes. Speaker DeLeo took the lead, and I worked with them to make sure on bail hearings there's more information before people are released on bail. And frankly, judges should at least be reviewed on some of the decisions they make. There's an internal process that happens now. They have not made that public. And look, Marjorie, you and I have talked about this for years. You can always take one case and say, well, this was the wrong decision. That's obviously not the right result in that case. I think the prosecutor has to...
But this just happened again in Lynn, post all the talk about Jared Remy and tightening things up.
No, I understand, and it doesn't sound like it's a bail situation so much. That was the instance there where he got out on bail before he was convicted. This is leniency in sentencing. We have sentence guidelines. We have an ability, not for the prosecutor, but to Vence always to appeal it. Getting that balance with judges is tough, but it's something that I care deeply about, and I think it should be part of the process when judges are confirmed.
What do you mean, though? Do we review them 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? Do we ask them to explain themselves
and
when they
who
make these
reviews
weird...
Well, right now it's an internal review that's done by the courts with the input of litigants and lawyers who have appeared before those judges. They have not made that public, but I believe...
Should they?
Well, perhaps in cases like this where the results appear to be not consistent with public safety and defendants' rights.
What do you think should happen to these judges?
I think first of all, we made a whole series of recommendations associated with domestic violence reform in the wake of the Jared Remy case. And one of the things that I learned was that he had been in a bunch of different courtrooms, and the court system as a whole didn't talk to itself about this.
Several different judges.
This has got to be part of the game plan going forward. You can't have people in front of 4 or 5 different judges each time, people behaving like it's their first trip into court. We've got to be able to consolidate and aggregate that information so that judges can make informed decisions about not just bail, but about everything associated with those kinds of cases. I have no problem at all, and I think it would be a good idea to have some sort of review, judicial review that takes place every 10 years or so. I mean, these are lifetime appointments.
And should they have to, Mitt Romney proposed, I think when he was running for governor, that not only should there be a review every 10 years, but then they should have to be re-upped by the governor's council or whomever. Well, should there be another vote on these people?
I think the review, I guess what I would say is, you can either have a process where they have to be re-upped, or the review would determine whether or not they would go before the governor's council. I like the latter better than the former. But I have no problem with doing that. I mean, these are lifetime appointments. We want them to make good decisions. That's why we set it up as a lifetime appointment. But they ought to be held accountable for that decision.
And we should be able.
Yeah, fine. But at the same time, everybody ought to know that at some point they're working for the public and the taxpayers are paying for it, and they should be held accountable for the decisions they make.
Let's hear from Boston Globe reporter Patricia Wen.
I cover social services extensively, and I have a question about the Department of Children and Families. Both of you have talked about caring about vulnerable children and the need for fixes within DCF. Neither of you, though, have talked about adding more money for the agency. A federal judge recently said that the primary problem with DCF is a budgetary shortfall more than anything else. My question is, do you think that you can fix DCF without adding more money?
Charlie?
I actually supported the governor's proposal, which was a $30 million increase in the budget for DCF in this past legislative session, both for social workers, for technology, and for a variety of other pieces. But I also think there are management reforms that ought to be part of what happens there. And I made a bunch of reform proposals when the Jeremiah Oliver case, that tragedy broke earlier this year. I think in many respects, DCF has a very difficult and complicated job. I mean, in some ways, they're dealing with some of the most troubled families in the Commonwealth of Mass. And the fact that the Commonwealth had an opportunity to move toward fixing this 4 years ago when Children's Rights filed that case, which was a very compelling case against the department, and the Attorney General and the Governor chose not to move to fix that, but instead to fight it, was a problem, and clearly borne out by what happened after that. And in addition to that, and I've said this before, you have a terrific record with respect to advocating for children, but to have that case in front of you and to stand silently by while the state of Massachusetts cut the department by over $40 million is a problem, and showed a lack of judgment on an issue that was right in front of you for several years.
Martha, you want to respond to that?
Well, first of all, the case was so compelling that the judge dismissed it. Let's be clear about what happened in this case. We did represent the government in that case. That's my job, and I always do that to the best interest of the children and the families that we need to represent. Let's be clear about what's going on here. There were outside lawyers who were suing us with a one-size-fits-all solution. It wasn't the right solution for Massachusetts. I thought better use of that money to go into DCF. I do believe that we need to restructure the agency. I've had a plan for that since I've worked with that agency for 25 years. We have an agency that has a mission to protect kids allegedly, but to keep families together. It's a mixed mandate. They don't do it right. And the pendulum swings. We leave kids in, we take them out. We need to change it. And by the way, I'm glad you're advocating for all these changes while you're running for governor, but you had an opportunity as Secretary and Undersecretary of Health and Human Services to look at caseloads, to look at technology, and 1 year reverted $2 million when you could have used it to hire more social workers for the caseloads, while I'm working in a child abuse unit seeing those caseloads go up.
Is $30 million enough money? I mean, everybody says that the big problem with this agency, with all due respect to restructuring and moving things around, is they don't have enough money. They've never had enough money. So
but it's
$30
not,
million.
It's not just about money, Marjorie. It's
but
about...
But this judge in every study that's looked at it says the same thing. It's money. They don't have enough money.
But we could give them more money. We give them more money. The problems don't get solved because the structure of the agency doesn't work to give a mission to the social workers. So you have untrained social workers who don't get enough support, who have caseloads that are too big, or they don't have enough training. I've worked with terrific social workers. I don't mean to criticize them, but we need to change the structure of the agency, and then we need to say, with an increase in technology, Charlie would probably agree with me, we need to better communicate what the mission of that agency is and what the workers are supposed to do, and hold them accountable when they don't meet those measures.
You know, speaking of DCF,
this is all stuff we could have been doing from 2010 forward, and instead we fought that case. And the lawyer who represented that case on the other side worked in the Clinton administration. She was hardly what I would call a partisan. And finally, you know, the way you described that was you said you did what was best for Massachusetts.
Yes.
We should have done what was best for the children that were being served by the department.
Yeah, and it was not that lawsuit. It was not settling that lawsuit for the one-size-fits-all result that the outside lawyers wanted. Charlie, I absolutely refused. You say, I've read the brief. The brief is by the partisan lawyers. And you've said you'd rather give a lot of money to outside lawyers to tell Massachusetts what to do. I don't think that's a good solution for a manager, and I don't think that's what a governor of the state should do.
You know, you, for the second time in two debates, Charlie Baker, have praised Martha-Coakley's work for children, which leads me to say we have to play, very briefly, a snippet of two Super PAC ads that when they air on television, most parents tell their children they have to leave the room. Let's just watch a little piece of these if we can.
More than 50 children abused, neglected, lives cut short, all while under the care of the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families. Martha Coakley knew about mismanagement at DCF. How could we trust her again?
Baker hiked premiums 150%, raising rates an average of $3,000 a year. And Baker eliminated nearly 2,000 jobs at his company, while tripling his own salary to over $1.7 million a year.
Okay, very, very, very quickly. Somebody who supports you, the former Attorney General, says he did a great job at Harvard Pilgrim. You say she's done a great job with children. I still don't understand, briefly, why are you not asking the Super PAC, Charlie Baker, and then Martha Coakley, please, I know I don't have formal power, please take that commercial off the air. It doesn't represent my values. Why aren't you doing that?
I said at the time I didn't like the tone of the ad. I still don't like the tone of the ad.
So why don't you ask them to take it down?
She and I are still having a discussion about whether they made the right decision or not. And I think the proof with regard to that is the tragedies and the problems and the broken agency that DCF became, in many respects, at the time, and through those $40 and $50 million cuts in their budget.
So why can't you just do that instead of having that ad play that makes it seem like she's a slasher or something, one of those slasher films? Nothing? Okay, fine. Why aren't you asking that the ad about him be pulled in light of the fact that virtually everybody says, despite your criticisms, he led the saving of Harvard Pilgrim?
Well, but the facts in that ad are accurate. Premiums went up, salary went up. That is the difference between those two ads. There's factual inaccuracies. I think that ad about DCF is heinous, not just about me, but suggesting that somehow I sat by while children were killed. That's outrageous. But
okay.
This is a campaign, and I understand that. And and I asked Charlie, and he wouldn't do it, unless we take the People's Pledge, there's no way to control these ads.
The first negative ad of this race, was run by a Super PAC, but the same week they started running that negative ad against me, they gave thousands of dollars to the Attorney General through a campaign finance loophole. I mean, to some extent, she doesn't have any credibility on this issue, in my opinion.
I
Okay.
disagree, but...
Well, let's move on. Akila Johnson from the Boston Globe.
I spent about 5 days this summer reporting from Ferguson, Missouri, which is a small suburb of St. Louis, Missouri, that erupted in kind of near constant protests after an African-American teenager, Michael Brown, was shot and killed. And many of the officials in the city as well as the state were criticized for not understanding the circumstances that contributed to the volatile situation. And so my question is, how would you, as governor, make sure that all communities, but especially communities of color, have a seat at the table so that disparities in education